I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet with special guest and AI expert, Guy Goldstein from Australia. It's good to have you back, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here with you.
And of course, the Golan is here from the Holy Land. Well, both of you are on the Holy Land,
That's
and
right. Shalom, everybody.
unholy land, which is Los Angeles. The dude's taking a, a, a
There are
chill
other
day.
words I would use that as opposed to unholy. Unholy is almost too kind for Los Angeles.
That's true. So I want to welcome everybody to the Daily Cheat Sheet, and we do our best to get on Rumble Live. So if you're listening to the audio, you could always subscribe and follow us on YouTube or Rumble and see what we look like as we do the show live. There is quite a bit going on, and Guy is Australian. And Guy, I got to be honest, I've always had an affinity for certain things Australian, not the beer since I don't drink. But
It's Elle Macpherson, isn't it?
That's exactly. No, you know what actually got it started was
Very
I had
formative
mono
for
and
me.
I was in Israel. I had mono and I was in Israel, and I was sick in bed for 4 weeks, and the only thing that was on television was cricket. And so I was forced to watch cricket, and like they had this movie about the great cricketer Don Bradman, and I sort of became a little interested in it. And I got to tell you, my interest in Australia lately, not very good. So the other day we were on the show, couple weeks ago, Golan and Mend and I were having this discussion where both of them, and I was in a bit of a disagreement with them, where they were okay with the banning, Guy, of social media up until the age of, for everybody under 16 because they're scared of how it's going to brain rot or all that stuff. And I asked Mend if his opinion changed a little bit, and he said yes. And because, Guy, when you look at it, Australia, the land where they ban the internet, they ban guns, but they don't ban radical Islamic terrorism.
Yes, Australia has so you have to understand, Australia started out as a prison colony, and it still thinks like a prison colony sometimes, which means it has a natural inclination towards authoritarianism. And the way the system in Australia works is it has a tendency to punish the end user rather than addressing systemic problems. One crazy person with a gun in 1996 killed 30 Australians, which was a horrific incident that scarred us all to this day. And to this day, it's my benchmark. When I hear about all the shootings in America, I think about the trauma we experienced that day. And I think, I do not know how America lives with their shooting problems. But banning all the guns didn't solve the problem. Not having the crazy person was great. Now there are new crazy people, and people are getting shot again. It turns out crazy people with guns kill people, right? Same thing with the internet.
Again, I want to go to the question of because the basic premise is they've banned all these things. They're banning the internet, but they're not banning radical Islam, and that's the huge problem in this little equation of banning. So yeah, it's great they banned the guns in '96. What was it, like close to 700,000 guns were confiscated? But obviously, a father and a son were able to get a hold of guns. They were Muslim or Pakistani. They should have been number one on the list.
The father was actually from Hyderabad, India, and the son was Australian born. Yes, so banning doesn't help when you're not addressing the core issue. Banning is an effective way to try to put a Band-Aid on a problem, but it's only a Band-Aid. You actually have to address the systemic problem. In Australia, there is a new problem.
I'm just going to interrupt for 1 second because I think it's important, and I do this often. I want our listeners to understand the reality of a situation, okay? When we talk about banning, I, for years, thought that was exactly what it was, that Australia banned guns. After this happened, and I found out that the father had 6 legally held firearms, including the ones that were being used to murder everybody. I asked all my Australian friends. Guy was the first person I texted, and then I texted a couple of other people. I texted a couple of cops I know in Australia.
He's number one Australia. He's your number one speed dial.
As my number one Australian, all the way. It's weird because you're my number one Israeli, but you're not even Israeli. Anyway, so I started asking a lot of questions like, if this is the banned, everyone brags about it all the time. We banned it, and everyone I hear in the States always talks about, using Australia as the example. And what I found out was I was completely misinformed. And it's not that they banned all guns. What they actually banned was guns for self-defense. This is really important because they didn't. There's a lot of guns in Australia, as it turns out. I discovered this week, but because there's a lot of hunting, there's a lot of sport shooting, there's a lot of stuff where you can legally own a firearm for work if you're a bodyguard, if you're a cop, etc. So there are a lot of people. It's not one clean federal ban. It's like this patchwork thing that basically, in short, amounts to you can't have a gun to protect yourself, but you can have a lot of guns for quote unquote recreational or work activities, which is not at all what I thought it was. It actually changes my entire mindset for what's going on in Australia. So I just wanted to make sure our listeners heard that, and now we can continue with the conversation.
Okay. So before we get too deep into the gun ban, which is going to be very important later on in the conversation, I want to start with the internet ban, because I think that that's actually a much more foundational to the mindset of the current government. The gun buyback was the gun ban 19, John Howard government. John Howard was one of the greatest prime ministers Australia has ever had. He is a man who believes in Western liberal values. Their entire approach was to maximize the protection of civilians while minimizing the imposition on people who wanted or needed to own guns. That's Johnny Howard. What you're looking at with the Albanese government is something very different. The idea of the internet is bad for kids. Let's ban the kids from the internet. What part of the internet? The internet we think is bad. That's a much more authoritarian approach that's not designed to minimize the impact. It's just swinging a battle axe at a problem and hoping for the best. Fundamentally, Australia has been at the forefront of legislation against internet companies in the past, but usually in a way that harms individual rights and freedoms, probably more than any other country in the West, including the UK. So, for example, Australia tried to pass a law forcing all messaging platforms to include a backdoor to encryption for the Australian government, which I don't know if you remember this. It was a few years ago, but it caused a lot of outrage because you can't build a backdoor into encryption. There's encryption or not encryption.
Right.
That's the whole point of encryption.
People don't understand this, by the way, that the whole, I mean, even just to use a more recent example, this whole TikTok is going to get sold thing. If TikTok is being sold, the algorithm is not being sold with it, and the encryption is still going to be in place. It's just someone else is going to be collecting the money basically while China still does everything else in terms of collecting data, and the algorithm still affecting everybody's opinions. So yeah, this is a fundamental thing that people don't understand. Encryption means
just for the
you're not
record,
getting in.
just for the record, I could listen to Guy talk for an hour. So, but
Wonderful.
I know the Australian voice always gets me. But and you know what? Screw the other guy. Okay, and that's Guy Pearce, the actor Guy Pearce, who is basically nothing but Palestinian under the guise of an Australian, or an Arab or a Hamas member under the guise. That piece of garbage from Australia. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. So getting back to the band, I just had to interject with Guy Pearce, jackass galore.
100% with you.
Yeah, and
You want to
none
go
of
to
us are
Australia,
arguing
look for
with
Hugh
that one.
Jackman. He knows how to be a gentleman about things.
No, but I don't think enough people know this because they don't people like Guy Pearce. They know who he is, but I mean, some of the vitriol that has come out of his mouth and he's had to recant. I'm guessing one of his agents said, "Are you out of your damn mind?" And knowing he's out of his damn mind, it's a known fact he's out. But I want to get back to this thing with
just real quick, just so our audience understands. Guy Pearce, fiercely anti-Semitic, pro-Palestinian, spread blood libel, spread lies like crazy on social media. Had to say, turns out, oopsies, I spread a bunch of lies. Didn't fully apologize. Just said, I'm going to go do some reflection, and then deleted his entire social media presence.
Yeah.
So that guy, by the way, just as a quick industry side note, little entertainment industry aside, Guy Pearce was in Christopher Nolan's breakthrough film, his second film known as Memento. Well, you would think after being the lead in Memento, he would be in every one of his movies, but suddenly he wasn't in any of Chris Nolan's other movies. And people always wondered what happened between them, whatever. And Guy Pearce came out a little while ago and said, actually, it was someone else who told Nolan that they didn't like him, one of the producers, one of the agents. And so that's why he didn't cast me anymore. And Nolan hasn't said a word about it, which means that is total horse, S-H-I-T. And Guy Pearce is just a bad person with a
well, there's a rule. I always have that rule in
personality.
Hollywood because it's like if you're in something that's massive, a TV show or a movie, it almost gives you your next movies, your next TV shows. They will continually try to work you in.
Yep.
And if they stop, there's one of two things. you're a drug addict, you're an alcoholic, and you have issues with that, with substance abuse,
Right.
or you're a total jerk and nobody wants to work with you.
Or you're
So there
Chevy
you go,
Chase
Guy
and you're not
Pearce.
coming back.
We have the
Yeah.
good guy, though. We have the
Yeah.
good guy from
Yes.
Australia. So,
All
Guy,
right,
go
Guy.
on.
Continue.
Okay, so when you talk about so we've talked about the encryption law. Now, when you talk about the social media bans, essentially they've recognized the problem that social media is unhealthy for children. And it is, because it's a drug. The internet is a drug. It's for 100 years that humans beings studied addiction to try to help people get away from addiction. And for the last 20 years, all of the same experts that understand addiction have been working with the corporations to help them addict children primarily, but everybody really, to an IV drip of dopamine in their pocket. They've recognized the problem correctly, but being a whole bunch of, let's say it, geriatrics that do not understand the problem, and they have come up with a solution that A, will not work because kids will find a way around it. B, doesn't actually address the problem because there's 100 other things on the internet that they haven't banned that still rock kids' minds. And C, impinges on the civil liberties of Australians before they even know that they have civil liberties.
That's a great point.
So look,
Yeah.
I think it is. I'm gonna agree.
I love the way he said that. Go on. You got to
No,
give him credit. That just sounded so.
There's a reason why he's my first call. All right, but I will speak to this as well because I think that what he's saying has enormous validity. Look, I think that I am one of those people who is now firmly, and I think all of us should be, but firmly in the social media's cancer camp. And every time I think about anything that can be done to destroy cancer, probably should be done. Now, the question, like if you're getting chemotherapy and you recognize that it's destroying your body at the same time it's destroying the cancer, you got to ask that question. Is it worthwhile? Is it doing what it needs to do? When I see this, I see, as Guy mentioned, there is no question that social media is the number one place for indoctrination, for mental health crisis, for cyberbullying, for addictive design features, all of that. And it should not be inflicted upon the younger generation. And I like that there's something being done about it. I actually think it's a very good thing. There is an issue, though. And the issue is that the law that Australia has put in place, at least Australia, this isn't the same everywhere, but Australia basically is restricting account creation and account presence. Now, here's something I didn't know until recently. I, not long ago, quit almost all social media. I shut down all of my accounts, Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and X and everything else. I shut them all down. I deleted them all. And I, by the way, haven't missed them a day or a second, and I feel a lot healthier. But what I discovered as someone who is in groups that are constantly sending me videos, Guy chief amongst them, by the way, you don't have to have an account because you can still see and hear everything. As someone who has no account, Guy sends me a thing. I click on it. It says, if you want to comment, if you want to join the conversation, yes, you need to join in. I watch every single video that Guy sends me, all 300 a day. And that's on every single platform. Now, I can't get out of the conversation.
I will tell you the fun part you don't know. They also still have a profile of you that's every bit as detailed as they would if you had signed up for an account. They do not care that you haven't pretended to tell them who you are.
That is correct. And in addition to that, let's say I am someone who doesn't even know what I just discovered, that you can still see everything. Cheap VPNs, AI age spoofing, there's digital masking now, facial age. I don't even know what half of the stuff is. You can get around. Look, there's proof. This is something that's been talked about for a long time. Cell phones, right? They all have this thing where you can restrict what your kids do on the phone. I don't know what the percentage is, but it was over 50% of children figure out how to get past it before the adults even know that there's an option.
So it's interesting you talk about the age verification because I have a Substack. I write a lot on my Substack. I write usually about politics or technology.
Well, what is your
world.
Substack? Don't just tease us.
It's cool. It's a Guy thing.
That's a great name.
Thank you. The other day after this law came into effect, I logged into Substack. My Substack knows that I'm Australian because you have to tell it where you're from. And that's where I was from. And all of a sudden, it's asking me, I'm in my 40s. I'm not a 16-year-old. I'm not a 15-year-old. I'm in my 40s to verify my age. Why? Because in order to enforce the government mandated age verification, it's not just the teenagers that lose the civil liberties that they didn't have. It's every single Australian now has to verify their identity in order to facilitate preventing the children from getting onto the social media sites.
Okay,
now,
so I want to close this up quickly because I want to move on to something that Golan brought up that has to do with Australia. I just want to close this up by saying Go on. The point I'm bringing up is in the line of banning. Okay. So they've banned guns, a lot of guns, let's just say. They're
Mhm.
trying to ban a lot of social media. On this scale, I ask you this honestly. I asked the dude this the other day. Levels of things to ban: guns, social media, radical Islam. Something's missing in this equation, Golan, of what's the most harmful to any society, including Australian society. So this is my issue. Unless you're going to be honest and real with what you're banning that causes the most harm, whether it be England, France, Australia, that to me causes the most harm. And what causes the most harm are innocent people not being able to protect themselves with guns from those same radical Islamists.
I will just say, I just heard a friend of ours, actually, a guy of mine, interviewing somebody about what's going on in Australia. And this is not my information. This is what was reported by somebody else, but I will repeat it, and I hope it's correct, is they had done an entire investigation on anti-Semitism in Australia with prescriptions. This is what should happen next, etc. And one of the ministers within the group basically said, we will not act upon any of these prescriptions or do anything regarding this report until a new report on Islamophobia is done as well for
Oh
fairness.
my God.
And
Yeah.
only then, once the prescriptions come done, then we will implement both
Come on.
simultaneously. So nothing has been done since the anti-Semitism investigation.
But you get
was
what
done.
You get where I'm going
now.
with this, right? You
One
get where,
hundred percent.
yeah,
But my point is that nothing's being done. It's weak, it's slow, it's ridiculous. And if they're not going to tackle Islamism or even Islam extremism head on, then
which
what they're
Donald, by the
doing
way, I
is-
want to give Donald Trump credit last
Yeah.
night. I want to give Tulsi Gabbard credit yesterday for calling out radical Islam. I was
Yes.
very impressed. Donald Trump did the same. President Trump did the same thing at the Hanukkah party last night. But Guy, I want to move on a little bit because there's so much to talk about. We'll have you back if you're available on Friday, and Golan's available on Friday. I'm not sure, but because you're more than welcome back as always, Guy. So we don't have to get everything out today. The question I want to ask you is this: is because Golan mentioned that security could have this, right? Now, my question to you is, obviously, with the Hanukkah Day massacre, the Hanukkah night massacre, and there were only 2 cops there. I don't even know if the cops do carry guns or are allowed to carry guns. I think from watching Harrow, which is a great Australian show, they didn't carry guns, most of the police officers.
Australian police do carry guns. They
Okay,
carry
so they do.
sidearms, not long rifles, but they do carry guns.
I love being
Yeah.
corrected. So yeah,
They were very, very close to where it was happening. Guns or not, if you don't show up or if you stand idly by or you cower, like we saw videos of some of them doing, doesn't really help. The guns are useless.
So my bigger question is, Guy, we know that there's a Jew tax, right? And that Jew tax is if you're Jewish and you have a synagogue, you go to synagogue, you go to or any school, you have to hire private security. Now, how come Chabad did not have?
Okay, so that's a great question. First of all, the Jewish community in Australia has a CSG, a communal security group that does a fantastic job. It's a volunteer group that's usually populated with young guys who in Israel would be going to the army. In Australia, a lot of them volunteer. They do have armed security. They usually do the security for synagogues, for example. Quite well established, the network. And there were CSG people at the event. One of them was shot in the line of duty. There were a small number of police there. There's a couple of things. One of them is everybody has a normality bias. It's been 40 years since a Palestinian terrorist tried to kill Jews in Bondi. Yes, there was the Iranian fire bombings, but those are nighttime vandalism versions of terrorism, which, it's different, right? It's just, welcome to being Israeli. We have gradations of how bad terrorism is and how much we have to let it change the way we live. So it's been 40 years since they actively tried to murder Jews for being Jews in Sydney, Australia, in Bondi specifically, about 5 minutes up the road from where the Jews were killed this time. And so people are just used to, there's a complacency that comes with 40 years of peace and quiet.
Yeah, but that is part of the tactic, though, because if you wait for government action only after a truly massive terror attack, you're by definition reacting and you're not preventing. And they know that.
But it's a good answer. But it's a good answer nonetheless. We get it. The lulling, right?
But what I'm saying is the lulling is part of the tactics.
Oh, 100%.
that are being used. Jews.
It's the same
100%.
thing. It's the same thing Hamas did to Alal Israel on October
I was
7th.
gonna use that as an example.
100%.
Yeah, I was gonna
100%.
use
The other thing that you have to understand is Australia is not America, right? That means the police had no idea what to do. They do not train for these situations. They do, the Bondi
That's a
police
very good point.
station. I grew up in Bondi. This is my local hangout. This is where I spent the ages of about 13 to about 25. The police station was about 100 meters or 150 meters from where the shooters were standing. There is a 50-meter range behind the shooter with zero cover. You could be standing on the other side. You could run 70 meters from the police station with a long rifle. Take your time crouching, setting up, being wherever you like. Point the gun, take the person out, and 2 minutes wouldn't have passed. Right? There was a 10-minute long video that we saw, filmed by people that were standing where the police could have reached, watching the guy standing there for 10 minutes.
But let's be clear. Let's be clear what Guy just said. I just want to repeat that. The police not only could have reached it, but in terms of where their station was, it would have been easy for them to reach that space. And you could see the people filming were not in danger because they were facing in the other direction shooting. They were able to film that entire time.
The shooter actually turns and faces the people filming and shoos them away at some point because he's not interested in shooting Australians. From his perspective, he's shooting Jews.
Right.
It doesn't matter that the Jews are also Australians. He didn't want to shoot at the non-Jews.
Okay, I want to, Guy, you just raised a great point, and Golan, he really raised a great point. And this is what it comes down to, and it comes down to for Christians too. It's the same thing, and it's the same eventuality. So when people say, are you America first? Are you this, are you Jewish first? These were Australians that happened to be Jew. These were Australians that were Jewish that were mowed down, but they were Australian. Okay. They were Australian. Some of them might not have been, some of them might have been Chabad missionaries or whatever it is. But for the most part, there was one French person, obviously there was one Israeli, but it was an Australian incident. And I don't think Australia, this should be a pox on Australia, Golan. This should be looked at as an embarrassment on Australia, and I don't think it is. It's like this crazy excuse that's going on that it's okay because it was Israelis and it's not Australia's problem. Well, like Steve Bannon brought up, the Mossad should have been there. Like, yeah, the Mossad should have been in Australia. That would have been.
I mean, just some of the dumbest stuff I've ever heard come out of a person's mouth.
But out of so many people's mouths and all these crazy conspiracies. But again, it's like if it happens in America, you're an American that got shot. That's why we have hate crimes.
Yeah, but that's not, by the way, even by allies, even by allied, supposedly ally or friendly news media or whatever, that's not how it's being reported. They don't say X number 13 Australians got killed, and they don't say 60. They don't say any of that. What they say is Jews targeted, Hanukkah targeted, which on one hand, you're like, all right, at least we're seen, we understand. When the prime minister issued his response, didn't mention a Jew in sight. He was just like, anyone who was concerned. So on one hand, great, recognize. On the other hand, Australian Jews are not guests. They're not foreigners. They're not just Jews. They're Australians. Full stop. Guy and I have had this conversation. They're born there. They pay taxes there. They serve there. They build businesses there. They vote there. They die there. How can you suddenly other them? Which is, again, part of the tactics.
And I think one of the things that it's important to understand is Australia isn't Australia without Jews, right? It is a unique case 100%. In the Western world that Australia was founded, right? There were Aborigines and then there were Jews, along with all of the other Australians that came over. There were 12 Jews on the first fleet. That was the first European settlement group, convict group that came to Australia. The Jewish community has always been a part of Australia. Australia's first native-born Governor-General, Sir Isaac Isaacs, was a Jew. Australia's most decorated military general who led the Australian troops in World War I, the famous Anzac Charge at Gallipoli, was Sir John Monash, a Jew. Some of Australia's greatest success stories, people like Frank Lowy, who created Westfield, which essentially Westfield in Australian is a synonym for mall. He brought the concept of malls.
It means mall in America too.
Okay, so Frank Lowy is a Holocaust survivor who stopped off in Israel to fight in the War of Independence on his way to Australia, then went to Australia, invented the concept of malls for Australia and apparently for the rest of the world, and has now come to retire in Israel. The Jews are an integral part of Australian society, the modern Australian society. And what's really been interesting about the Jewish experience or the Jewish journey in Australia is the Jews were also some of the louder, like the experience in America, where it was the Jews that were standing with the Black Americans in the civil rights movement. The Jews were some of the most vocal and the most ardent advocates for Aboriginal rights and bringing the first Australians into the fold of modern Australia.
I
So
want to stop
not
you
only
there
were they
because
always there, but they're the bridge.
I want to stop you there because I just want to say, because I want to move on. Two major mistakes that Jews have made is sometimes putting their nose in places where they don't belong. Civil rights movement are helping it. Did not really work out too well for us here in America, and it doesn't appear that it worked out too well for the Australians.
The irony is brutal that Jews, and then we'll move on, but Jews helped build the country strong enough to protect everybody, including the minorities there. Now the same country hesitates when it's the Jews who need protection. This is the same old story. It's disgusting. And by the way, Guy, I don't know if you mentioned it because I lost the audio for a minute. Did you talk about the number of Holocaust survivors in Australia?
No, but
This, I didn't know this till you told me. This is fascinating. Just do this and then I promise we'll move on, Judah. But it's like, is it the largest? Here, you say it. You say it.
So Australia took in the largest number of Holocaust survivors in the world outside of Israel after the Holocaust.
Is that not amazing?
Well, I mean, it does make sense because they wanted, right? Wasn't one of the places where they wanted to make safe haven for Jews when they were discussing it wasn't
It wasn't that. It was more a combination of Australia being in a period that it was importing. It wanted to import more Europeans, so they had sort of an immigration policy that was relatively fair to people who had the right complexion. That was during the White Australia period, so it wasn't fair, but it was fair if you looked the right way. And if you knew someone in Australia, and a lot of Jews had gone to Australia during the gold rush, seeking their fortune, or during earlier periods, and so there was a lot of anchor migration. But it turned out that a lot of Holocaust survivors came to Australia, and one of the things that I think people forget is before Bondi Beach was this magical, beautiful, iconic beach that everybody knows and loves, there was a sewage treatment plant just up the hill, and it was a place that was far from the city with a sewage treatment plant, so no one wanted to be there. And the people that came there and lived there were the Jews. Before it was iconic for being Australian, it was iconic for being Jewish. And Jews are an integral part of what made Bondi Bondi.
Sounds very much like Israel, and I'm Guy
and Brooklyn and everything.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're. I absolutely love this knowledge, and I'm not kidding when I say you've been on before. I want you back to talk more and more about this stuff, but I do want to get to other.
I'll just say one last thing here, and then I promise.
I said this the other day on the show.
I know. Don't repeat it. Don't repeat it.
You didn't listen
to
this.
It's a lie. It's a lie. I know I'm lying, but I'm not going to lie this time because this is not about Australia. This is about Jews worldwide. Is when you see migration happen post-Holocaust, when there are certain places that make it easier if you're white passing, like most of the Jews who came to Australia were, and same thing with America and other places, people then see that as a monolith and they forget that roughly half the world's Jewish population are Mizrahi and Sephardic and Ethiopian and North African and Middle Eastern and are not white passing at all. And so there is a false equivalency to this kind of white European nonsense. And Jewish identity has nothing to do with skin tone. I just wanted to put that out there. That's it.
And if I can make a segue, because we're already talking about Islamic terrorists and some of the things that Donald Trump has done to make the world a safer place.
If you let me let me just chime in for a second. If you're just tuning in, you are listening to the Daily Cheat Sheet here with Guy Goldstein, AI expert, and Golan expert in all things. And I want to say hi to the people that are on the Rumble rants. And I like that one person, Turbo, was joking around just now when he said one last thing, because my rule is, and it's the great speaker lie, is anytime a speaker says, this is my last story, you could guarantee they will go on for 45 more minutes. Guy, the thing I want to get to quickly, then I'll move on a little bit, is obviously we're talking about this radical Islamic problem, right? And you and I were talking about this on the phone. I think President Trump is trying to handle this the best way he can. I don't think there's been a president that has dealt with radical Islam the way Trump has sort of tried to deal with radical Islam. And the title of the show is, are we better off than we were 11 months ago? And yes, we'll get to America in a second, but the world is better off than it was 11 months ago. There's no doubt about that. So go on, Guy.
Yeah. So I want to say, I think a big shout out goes to President Trump for getting on board with calling out the Muslim Brotherhood. Because when we talk about radical Islam, it's really easy to blame ISIS. It's really easy to go to sort of the lone wolf approach or little small cells. But there is institutional radical Islam that is deeply embedded in the Western world. To some extent, the Arab world are laughing at us because they solved this problem to some extent. The Saudis and the Emiratis look at us and think, what the hell is wrong with you people? What is wrong with you people? We showed you what these people are. We've explained it to you. We've told you what to do. Why are you letting them set up shop in London and Sydney and Melbourne? Why are you letting them set up offices in Minnesota
and Houston and Dearborn and everywhere else?
Right.
The list is too long.
And so when Donald Trump actually jumped in and called it out, right? You know, Tony Abbott and Ron DeSantis also deserve to be called. Greg Abbott. Sorry.
Listen, you're excused.
We
You're not
had our
American.
own Abbott.
Yeah.
I was listening to the former Australian Prime Minister this afternoon. Too many Abbotts and not enough Costellos. Nobody wants to hear Peter Costello. It's okay. But Greg Abbott, Ron DeSantis, and Donald Trump coming out that strongly against the Muslim Brotherhood and CARE, which is really important to understand because it's the face. It's the pretty face. It's American Psycho. It's the pretty face hiding the psychopath behind it. That makes the world a safer place. That even if the action doesn't lead to direct enforcement actions right now, it has brought that conversation to a place in the world where everybody's trying to understand what that means now. Everybody's trying to understand what this is. And that's the first time in decades that people have taken this seriously. I work with researchers that have been studying the Brotherhood for 20, 30, 40 years. This is the first time the world has been awake to it. And that's Donald Trump.
And it's a crazy thing to think about that these are unindicted co-conspirators in the largest terrorism case in United States history. And still people are like, what's the problem? You're talking about, by the way, Muslim Brotherhood. You're also talking about CARE, both unindicted co-conspirators when it comes to this. So what you're talking about is a group that we already know works with terrorists, funds terrorists, are terrorists, or infiltrated by terrorists, or were founded by terrorists, all of that. And somehow so many people have no idea and didn't until Trump and now DeSantis and other people in specific states started either, designating certain chapters of the Muslim Brotherhood or Muslim Brotherhood all in or CARE as terrorist organizations. People are like, what? That's the group that Obama invited in. That, like, people are clueless when it comes to this. So I love that he's starting to open people's eyes to this and that the other people under him are starting to do the same.
Well said. I'm very glad that Guy brought that up. Listen, I've written pieces where President Trump is the best foreign policy president of my lifetime. I also think Marco Rubio is without a doubt the greatest Secretary of State the United States has ever had. I don't think there's any question about that, about what he's had to juggle on so many different fronts. I don't think there's ever been a Secretary of State that has come in. And yes, you could always look at the past, but look at the geopolitical nightmare that was given to him by Biden. I mean, can you imagine Rubio going to work every day going, what? They did this too? like what? This is on the...
You know what it makes me think of is I was at the gym not long ago and this guy came in that he was working hard. But it was like watching Jelly roll before he lost a little bit of weight there. And you're just like, and I was thinking to myself, like, I used to be a heavy guy. I was never that heavy. And I thought, that's good. There's got to be something about starting so far behind where you're like, you're dedicating yourself. You got to work extra hard. It's going to take extra time. That's how I feel about Rubio. Rubio came in. It was like he had all these pounds just slung on top of him by the previous administration. They were like, all right, start working out. He's like, all right, got to start somewhere. And little by little, he's been pushing back on this. And I'll tell you, he's certainly the most serious Secretary of State America's had in decades, if not ever. Right? He's a guy who truly believes in defending America's interests and not just managing decline politely. Huge, huge props to that guy.
100%. And I want to thank Sender86 in the Rants who wrote, what's better than listening to the only excellent and fact-packed show each day, having the chance to live stream while making dinner and sharing the discussions with my kids because TDCS is clean. And we've worked on making sure it's clean, because especially we did not know this. There's certain words that are very hard sometimes not to use, and we won't use them. And it, because we're not the cursey type, but even sometimes in Australia, it's actually banned, explicit. If you accidentally curse on a podcast, especially Apple, you cannot download that episode.
Another thing that Australia banned.
Which is ironic, because for Australians, cursing is second nature.
Yeah, but guy, because nothing they do makes sense. That's the point. Everything they touch, everything they do, everything. This is it. It's the Biden. It's the leftist creed. We do things that make zero sense, that bring zero utility, but cause chaos on purpose. And by the time you're trying to, as Golan always points out, by the time you're trying to fight the fourth lie, you're still on the first. And in this case, by the time you're on the fourth piece of whatever they're feeding you, you're like still trying to fight the first thing. You're like, wait, butter's bad for you? What did you say back then? And you're like, all of a sudden the ice caps have melted all over the world by the time you're on number 4. And so, Guy, but I want to get to that, because it's like, I understand President Trump's frustrations right now. In 11 months, he closed the border, and I jokingly say he did it too quickly. It was the thing he did in his first term. Remember how quickly he got rid of ISIS? People were
From an
getting
optics perspective, you mean?
From an optic, right? People, it's great.
He made it look so easy that nobody cared.
Right, that was like, oh, is that easy? Everybody.
Well, it's not that nobody cared. It's that everyone thought, well, if that's how quick and easy you can solve that problem, do all the rest that quick and easy. Where's all my money that the economy created? Where's this? Where's that? Where's all the foreign policy?
And I quoted you the other day, actually. It was the truth I quoted you on, was when you said, I thought it was great when you said, it's far easier to gain weight than it is to lose weight. I thought that was, I think that really sums it up quite perfectly.
Can you tell I just lost 40 kilos? All my metaphors are weight related.
And how do you like the haircut, by the way? Just good.
Beautiful.
I was finally able to get one. I suffer from a condition called alopecia, which, not totalis, where you get spots on your head sometimes.
And unlike the original, very low grade quality, you look like a very handsome Elvis Costello.
Well, thank you. Or I'll get Jeff Goldblum. I always used to get when people say, who you remind me of? And I was like, well, who's the popular Jew now? And I was like, in the night, I was like, is it Jonathan Silverman in the 90s? Like, it would switch. It was like Jeff Goldblum, whoever was the popular one.
Jeff Goldblum is good.
One.
You can stick with that.
Hey, why not? Hey, I'll take Ben Stein. But I want to. But when you look at what President Trump guy has to face every day, it's the same thing. Every cupboard he opens up is more disaster that Biden left him. And go ahead, guy.
So I was going to say, look, President Trump is a transformational president who had his first term stolen by an incompetent government. He understood something that most politicians don't understand, which is that the world doesn't work in 4-year cycles. And he understood that we were coming to the end of a much larger cycle, and the world was changing, things were moving. And if America wanted to stay ahead of the pack, it had to act. And I think a lot of the things that he's doing, some of which have been challenging from an Israeli perspective, or even from an Australian perspective, certainly from a European perspective, are actions that he is taking to secure another American century, because the other choice is to finish the managed decline. And so not only is he opening cupboards and finding messes, but he's actually figuring out he's trying to figure out, how do you take this total catastrophe, which is the 20-year-long managed decline of America, and turn it around into a resurgence.
100. Look, it's honestly insane. And every time you say it, I'm like, there's no way that's right. It's only been 11 months.
Right. That's exactly
term.
Right. And he's got to give an Oval Office speech tonight, because people just aren't getting it. And it's like, I get it.
But people, I'm looking at the polling, right? Just pure polling. People are acting like he's been sitting back in the Oval Office for a decade. Every problem that existed before he walked in the door is his fault, according to the polling. That's inflation hangovers, border chaos, global instability, cultural rot. It's all being pinned on him. He's been there for less than a year.
Yeah,
that's insanity.
I think it's important to understand. It's not even that. It's people are expecting immediate. People think the world is social media. They're expecting immediate gratification. We voted in a new president. He went into office. Now inflation is supposed to go down. The dollar is supposed to get stronger. The economy needs to be 3 times as big as it used to be. And by the way, we need to now be the dominant force in manufacturing, AI, and any other future technology
And
we
all
want to
wars
invent.
must stop. Like
Right.
it's like they wanted to order stability on
That's right.
Amazon
If they want to
Prime and
vote,
wanted a
if they want
2-day
to vote for a
turnaround.
god,
Great
if they want to
analogy.
vote for God, then they should vote for God. If they want a president, they need to understand that these things take time.
That's very
Yeah,
good.
I think both
And
of you. I think both of you perfectly summed that up. And Guy, I think it is very interesting because listen, this isn't to say people aren't struggling, and this isn't to say people aren't suffering. They are. There's a lot of suffering that's going on as a direct result of Biden's policies, of his energy policies, of his oil policies, of every policy that he made. People are struggling. Excuse me, are still struggling with. There's no doubt about it. But he's Trump's biggest problem is he doesn't have enough people out there that are able to that have the capabilities of talking about this.
so one thing people don't know about me is that I actually studied economics at Colgate University. I wasn't always into the technology. I once liked people and markets, not necessarily at the same time.
Not necessarily in that order.
And I think one of the things that we have to realize is you can't even put this on Biden because this problem goes so much further back. We're talking about 30 to 50 years of broken economics where we've used fiscal and monetary policy to avoid natural economic corrections. So we worry about the AI bubble. We worried about the real estate bubble. The entire economy has been a bubble that's been growing for, let's call it 30 years, since about the Trump as a business person recognized that. And I think one of the things that you see about what he's doing, which again, not always the most comfortable policies for me as someone who my first priority is, security in the Middle East. But one of the things that Trump is doing that nobody else has done as president and nobody else could do as president.
I'm
is
sorry. Real quick, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to let you know that this just came down. FBI Director Dan Bongino announced his departure from the bureau. Just popped up into my alerts.
So I guess that wasn't a rumor that Miranda Devine reported the other day, and that was actually the truth in the New York Post. So that's
health
not
or politics.
Sorry,
was it health or politics?
No, it was so he could get back into the Dan Bongino game of Inspector Clouseau, podcaster and radio host, and he wasn't getting the listen. For whatever reasons he's left. I think he's a solid citizen. He's actually served our country. He's done, he's done the deed. So he made a decision to leave. He's a big boy. Good on Dan Bongino. But again, you're talking about something that Trump and Kash Patel inherited, which is the FBI, which is the modern day FBI, which is not your J. Edgar Hoover's FBI. And I'm sure Kash Patel is in there, probably over his head guy a lot. And you look at this, you look at no further than this thing with Brown University, this horrific event that happened, and we still don't know anything. And they keep on releasing these grainy photos. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, where they're releasing these. So they've released photos. Guy, it could be you. I could literally call up and say, if Guy had a black hoodie on, I could literally call up the FBI and go, there's a guy in a black hoodie that looks
my hoodie was blue, I swear.
Yeah, but I'm saying it's like I don't even know if they're doing the right thing. I got to be honest. When you say and I was saying it's really important when you say you have a person of interest, that person really better be a person of interest, okay? Because this is how it spreads really quickly online of these false narratives.
So let me tell you a story that we know as Israelis that I think Americans aren't as familiar with, because everybody's heard of the Mossad, but nobody really knows what they do. Everyone thinks they, Eric Bana going around killing Nazis or whatever it is, the cool spy stuff.
That was a Munich reference, the very, very morally dubious film by Steven Spielberg.
But also an Australian reference to Eric Bana. We can tie it into Con the Fruiterer too, but we won't go there. But
I got to be honest, I like Eric Bana.
I do too.
I've got some great personal stories with Eric Bana. Maybe I'll post a picture of the two of us together.
One thing that Israelis understand that I think Americans don't understand as much is we live in a constant threat environment, which means we actually have some inclination of how many terrorist attacks don't happen because we have the Mossad watching over us, because we have the Shabak watching over us. because we have the Oman watching over us, because we have the Israeli police intelligence watching over us. The average, by the way, is something like 250 attacks get stopped every month. Right? So once in a while there is an attack, and it's horrible and terrible, and it's tragic. But for every one attack that happens, there's more than 200 attacks that don't happen because of our equivalent of the National Intelligence Services. All of these things, like the 4 bombers that were exposed in California recently that were plotting a New Year's Eve bombing, the one in New Orleans that was plotting something. You've had a porous southern border for 5 years. 10 million people came through.
At least.
Yeah. Latin America is littered with with narco terrorists. Hezbollah is deeply embedded in the cartel system in South America. The amount of work the FBI are doing to protect Americans that you don't know about would blow your mind, and it would leave people. It would probably leave people constantly paranoid about what's coming down the road. Which is why in Israel people are a bit more comfortable sharing that information than in places that feel safe. Right. But it is important to understand that even with the political echelons of the FBI and the nonsense that they've been pulling over the past decade, the people in the FBI are doing the sorts of things that people in international intelligence agencies are doing to keep people's lives feeling like everything's fine are immense. And whatever Kash
By the
Patel
way,
is
I
doing
agree with you, Guy. I think that's a great point, Golan, that he's making. The problem with the FBI in America is there are at least 6 or 7 cases, Guy, of where they did have intel on the people first, and they did not act. And whether that's Sam Perdue, Indianapolis, the Boston bomber. I know I want to say that I don't want to say Sandy Hook, but that kid that went crazy in one of those states. They've had active intel on a lot of the Pulse nightclub.
And that ties you back into Australia, where they looked into the younger of the 2 shooters in Australia had been investigated in 2019 for connections to an Islamic terror organization. And yet his father, the next year, had his firearms license renewed. They were allowed to have guns in the same household. And so these mistakes happen. And to some extent, I think my instinct would be that they would happen more in countries that have less experience with these sorts of things. But like I said, for every mistake, and there are mistakes, there's 100 incidents that they do stop. And I think one of the tragic things about, it's not a tragedy. One of the unfortunate things for the people in the agencies is every attack that they stop is something incredible and important that they've done, which they will never be recognized for. And everything that takes place, every attack that gets through that gets past the keeper, is something horrific and tragic that they will constantly be blamed for. And so I think the fact that you can count on 2 hands the number of incidents.
Guy, I go on. I think here in America, though, I think it leaves a darker taste in people's mouths because of what happened at Mar-a-Lago, what happened, with them even saying to the DOJ, we should not go with Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, and the list goes on of the corrupt, it always used to be politically correct to say, well, it's not the rank and file, right? It's just the top dogs. And Guy, I agree with you. You're 100% correct. Most of these people do yeoman's work, and they will never get the credit. The problem here is, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, I think it was the Knapp Commission that happened in New York. I often talk about the Knapp Commission. That was basically, I think that was with Serpico, right? It was after Frank Serpico, how bad the New York police, how rotten to its core was, right? So what essentially did they do? And police fact checked me to make sure it was the Knapp Commission, because there were a couple of commissions. There was also the Church Commission that was going on pretty close. I think that was with the CIA. So please, and the whole goal was, Guy, of the Knapp Commission was, if you're a lieutenant, everybody underneath you, the 5 people below you, you're responsible for. So if those people mess up, it comes back to you. And
it's called accountability, right? That was the whole point, right? Is that the Knapp Commission was the system investigating itself, right? And the whole idea of it was at least, okay, for those of you who either know Serpico, read Serpico, watched the movie Serpico, et cetera, they talk about this within it, but it was sold as reform. Ultimately, what it really amounted to was appearing concerned, publishing a thick report, making everyone feel like everything's okay now, and then changing nothing. which is a very common governmental trick. But the concept was to go through this accountability exercise.
But Guy's point, you're 100% correct, Guy. And we do have to give a shout out to the hardworking FBI agents. Listen, all kidding aside, the FBI agents, I said yesterday, Golan, I know you missed the show, but I don't think when Susie Wiles came out with her Vanity Fair hit pieces on certain people, she squarely picked certain people. One of them was J.D. Vance, and one of them was Pam Bondi. And I don't think it was coincidental that she picked those two to go after. I think Pam Bondi has done a major disservice to the Department of Justice, and exactly for the reasons why Susie Wiles brought up. I don't think there's, whether she's in over her head or she's...
Did you, just out of curiosity, since I did miss yesterday's show, were you pro or con her?
No, I'm very pro what Susie Wiles did. Susie Wiles, just so people understand who Susie Wiles is, because a lot of people don't understand this. I just want to give this sort of example because I did not bring this up yesterday, is her father was a very famous American football player. That's football, not soccer or rugby or cricket. And her father was very famous. His name was Pat Summerall. And he was a notorious alcoholic, which he had brought up sort of about Trump, about his alcoholic inclinations, which Trump came out immediately. It was like they had a report, Trump immediately responded, yeah, that's exactly who I am. I don't drink because I know what's going to happen to me. And she that's who Susie Wiles. She was raised by Pat Summerall, who was very underspoken. But when he spoke, because he was a commentator in football, he was John Madden's football partner. So you'd be listening to Madden bluster away, right? A lot like, in some ways like Trump in sometimes. And then Summerall would come on and be like, what an amazing play. You know what I mean? You listened every time Summerall spoke. And that's Susie Wiles. You listen when she speaks. She's gotten DeSantis elected. She's been in politics for 40 years. She's done that job. And there are some people that don't like her. That's fine. I have no problems with what she did. I think she did it purposely. There's a reason why she called J.D. Vance a politician and a conspiracy theorist. My take on it is she's referring to his connections with Tucker Carlson. I don't think that's much of a stretch to say that. But yes, I didn't want to say that yesterday, but I think that's 100% why she said that. That's my take on that situation. Sorry, Guy.
So I was just going to say that my biggest grievance with Pam Bondi is that for the past week, everybody has been calling Bondi, and it has been driving me insane.
I was thinking about you every time I hear it.
I mean,
very learned people do. Ben Shapiro has not pronounced it correctly.
There's no way you can't look at it. And I really don't, Guy, you know what? You put a lot of perspective. I got to be honest. Thank you for doing that about what the FBI does and about what the CIA does. I mean, they've been tarnished and tethered. There's no doubt about it. Sort of like reminds me of that Johnny Cash song, "Ragged Old Flag." It's gone through all these different wars and events, but that ragged old flag still survives. And the FBI will come back and it'll turn around, and it'll turn around under Trump. But go on, the last thing I want to talk about quickly, because we brought this up before the show, and it was sort of fascinating. I don't know how it came about, but we were talking about, Glenn Greenwald and all these people blaming all these conspiracies. Every conspiracy now is Israel. Israel has become, like orange is the new black. Israel is the new alien. Okay. Like literally, if you can't explain something right now, it no longer is it the aliens, it's the Mossad. How did your lawn get mowed in a circle in the middle of the night? It wasn't the aliens, it was the Mossad. It was, and when you listen to these people, this is the sickness, I mean, are they going to, now I'm curious, have you been probed by the Mossad? And instead of, 7,000, and that was Guy's line. So sorry for stealing your line.
No, my line was just pointing out that the abductions and probings were a different problem. You can look at reports in the UK about who's doing that. Not the Mossad.
Yeah. But go on. That's a good analogy.
I think it's a very good analogy because it is exactly what's happening. Every global problem somehow goes back to Israel. No matter how absurd the connection, no matter how ridiculous, plane crash happened, it's Israel. Border crisis, it's Israel. Terror attack, it's Israel. Jews are killed. Israelis are killed. It's Israel. Like no matter what happens, it's just a pure obsession, is basically the ultimate scapegoat now. It's an ideological reflex. And you're talking about Glenn Greenwald, but the supercuts that have been done on every one of these people, the Tucker Carlsons and everybody else, where you just Israel, and their guest Israel. It's nonstop and unbelievable. And of course, They didn't invent this. This is not a new phenomenon. This is a rehashed old, right? They're kind of laundering the hostility that once existed. Pattern's always the same. You erase agency from the terrorists, or you don't even mention them in some cases. You erase the ideology from Islam, which is something, as you pointed out, is talk about cancer. Social media ain't got nothing on Islam. You erase responsibility from anyone who isn't Jewish or Israeli, and then, or in this case, the West or white or whatever word you want to apply to it, men, et cetera, Christians. There's a list. Jews and Israel are at the top of that list right now, and it's just pure
Look,
moral inversion.
the stories that were the way that the story and the story of what happened in Bondi has been told is such a masterful example of this maniacal inversion. So first of all, the majority of people have focused on Ahmed al-Ahmed, the Muslim Australian or the Syrian Australian hero who took the gun from one of the terrorists, was shot a couple of times, has been in hospital. We wish him a speedy recovery. But that wasn't the important part of the story. Good Muslim stops terrorist was not the important part of this story. And yet, in the exact same story, they somehow managed to erase the fact that the terrorists were Muslim from the
Yeah.
story. So the terrorists were terrorists.
They got to
They weren't
Muslim wash the
jihadis. They
story.
certainly weren't Muslims. They were just terrorists.
Yeah, I
The
brought
good
that up. It
guy-
was like I brought that up yesterday. It was like either it was like a mass shooting or terrorist attack, but not a radical Islamic attack. And that's why I
Mhm.
was happy at the Hanukkah party that that was brought up. And I don't know if you caught the as we're wrapping up. I don't know if you caught the events of the Hanukkah party, but Miriam Adelson, who continually gets knocked by people, and it's really just disturbing. The Adelsons, yes, they've given tons of money. First of all, she is Israeli. Their businesses have created hundreds of thousands of jobs for Americans, at least hundreds of thousands of jobs. And I think she jokingly said that she called Alan Dershowitz up to figure out if Trump could run for a third term, and she said she would give $250 million for that. I wonder if people would have an issue with that. And I don't think she was joking either. So, you know what I got to say about Trump? He brings light into this world. He really does. He really brings light into the world when he when you see him with troops that have been injured, when you see him with the hostages that have been freed, when you see him at a Christian event, a Hanukkah party, no matter what it is, he has that grin. He still has that inner child in him. And it's something remarkably special. So I'll just end the guy. I'll let you go. It's so when Susie Wiles did that, I think Trump told her to. I think Trump really said to Susie, "Go out and do this Vanity Fair thing." I don't think Susie Wiles did an 11 time interview with Vanity Fair and accidentally said certain things. It's not who she is. You're not the Ice Maiden for nothing.
So I just want to say, I agree with you. And one of the things that one of my measures of a man is how he treats his family, right? I think that maybe this is just because I'm a Jew. I think that family is one of the most important things in the world, if not the most important thing in the world. And I think you can tell a lot about people by the way that they treat their family. And if there's one place that Trump has always been an absolute mensch, it's when you see him when you see the way he always talks about his family with such pride. And he gives the impression that he is such a good father, and nobody has ever questioned that, right? I mean, put that alongside Joe Biden, and you might as well be comparing apples to things that I can't even think of an appropriate thing to put alongside
apples.
That's right, apples to yes. And I think that I think that comes down to a lot of what you're saying. I think that at the end of the day, is he perfect? No. But again, if you want to vote for God, vote for God. He's a man, he has flaws, he has desires, he has all the foibles that make humans as delightful as they are. But ultimately, he seems to be doing things with good intentions. He seems to have good instincts as to what needs to be changed if we're going to have another American century. And by the way, again, not American, very invested in there being an American century. I do not want to live in a Chinese century. I do not want my son to grow up in a Chinese century. I want another American century. So I accept that sometimes there will be things that I don't agree with, but if he's going to make the deals that need to be done to get the economy back to a place where America can thrive again, if he does keep his promise to try to bring manufacturing back to America, if he does keep an eye on on sort of the fiscal policy to make sure that inflation and unemployment keep Americans fed and in the job market, understanding that it's going to be hard for a decade, right? This doesn't get fixed in one month or 11 months. If he
Perfectly
does those things, he's going to
Yeah.
make the world a better place, and he will be remembered for that, even if people can't see it right now.
Perfectly said, just like
Agreed.
Richard Nixon. I just want to say, I wrote this post yesterday about Megyn Kelly, like she was announcing that she was like brokering this deal between Candace Owens and Erica Kirk, like it was Nixon brokering a deal with China, or like she was like Reagan dealing with Gorbachev or releasing the hostages. And it's like my whole point of it was your job right now should be talking about the economy, and and you talked about this with Tim Pool, saying right now is a hard time in the podcast world because there are no wars going on, right? So people have to do clicks, right?
No
This
wars
is
and
what
no
they're living
elections.
on, because
Right.
nobody wants to be the one that comes out and says, "Hey, Trump's doing a great job. Let's focus on the good right now." But can you imagine if podcasters did that? And somebody responded, and I said I would read it out loud. Kelsey B, I'm not sure who they are in truth. I asked them if I could read it, and they said, "So well said." I'm not saying reading it because they complimented me. I find her and many like her nauseating and puke worthy. So I just bow my head and pray for grace. So many things we want to ignore must be exposed and then moved on from. These dangerous talking heads are taking their careers into the garbage dump, and so many just willingly jump right into the trash heap right alongside them. Just like so many claim to love our creator, yet only go through the motions. Gratitude for sharing your honor. So few have morals, yet claim righteousness these days. Bless you. Thank you very much, Kelsey, on True Social. When you posted that, when people post things like that really make everything we do worthwhile. Every discussion we're trying to have worthwhile, because I love the job Trump's doing. Golan's in Israel. Both of you are in Israel right now. It's 3:30 in the morning. It's late in the evening, not to get people to start thinking of the Eric Clapton song.
God forbid.
And we do this for fun and for free because we want to talk about the great things Trump's doing. We want to talk about these things because it's amazing. And the fact that he has to do an Oval Office speech to get this point across is somewhat shameful. And it's heartbreaking. Final thoughts, Guy, on that before we...
So I was going to say, one of the things that I think it's really important to mention is it's not just Trump. It's the great things Trump is doing. It's Rubio, it's DeSantis, it's Abbott.
Yeah.
The depth of the Republican bench right now
is awesome.
Is phenomenal. The chaos that comes from the talking heads that are trying to cause, that are profiteering off the chaos is a distraction. And it's a distraction that if too many people get distracted by it, it will cost us. It will cost the Republicans the White House in the Congress and the Senate in the midterms. But if people can keep on the keel and get things back in order, Donald Trump doesn't need a third term, because the depth of players that the Republican Party has coming up behind him has the potential to, again, really drive us into that American century that, God willing, we will arrive at.
Perfectly said. And El Turbo in the Rand said, Guy speaks eloquent truth. Excellent guest. You are an excellent guest. And I want to thank Golan for introducing us and Golan for having you on the show. I want to thank Golan for doing this in Israel. You having fun with your family?
Having a tremendous time catching up with old friends. I've only been here a very short time this time around, but my intention is to really milk the most out of Hanukkah and milk the most out of the country. So yes, so far so good.
Okay, and so thank you both for being here. And once again, Guy, your points were absolutely brilliant. And it's time to stop always taking pot shots at people. And all kidding aside, I do pray they find this Brown school this horrific event. And I want to get into the next time the 7 tenets basically of what you were talking about, how the Muslim Brotherhood has invaded America. So if you're available next time, I want to discuss that.
And let's reiterate one more time for our listeners: Trump has only been back in office for 11 months. He inherited a dumpster fire. 11 months is hardly enough time to stop the bleeding, let alone rebuild what has been deliberately dismantled for years. And while he's doing all of that, the resistance is not imaginary, right? The bureaucracies are deliberately dragging their feet. The courts are slowing things down or deliberately sabotaging what he's trying to do. Foreign actors are testing limits. The media is distorting everything. get out of your head a little bit. The polling says you're in it right now. You're firmly entrenched in this idea that everything is Trump's fault. And it's like if the house is on fire and you're asking the fireman why he hasn't rebuilt it yet while it's still in flames. So let him put the fire out and then the rebuilding can begin, whether it's him or the next guy, as Guy pointed out. Just relax and let the process go the way it's supposed to go.
Perfectly said.
And do your bit.
And that's exactly right. Everybody do our
Right.
bit.
Correct.
Everybody do our bit. When people talk negative, we talk positive, no matter where it is, no matter what social media platforms we're on. Talk about the positive that Trump's doing, and that's it. And talk about the positive that, like you said, all the other people in the cabinet are doing. They are doing some amazing work. And yeah, and I just find it ironic. I find it sort of funny that, you know, you brought every two examples people always use as analogies for some reason are still widgets and are still fires, like arsons. It's like widgets and arsons. They fit everything. I want to thank you both from the bottom of our heart. I want to thank everybody that's been following and downloading and listening. Everybody that supports us, thank you from the bottom of our heart. You can find us everywhere at thedailycheatsheet.com. I want to wish everybody a good morning, afternoon, and night world, wherever you are. God bless you all.